What would you do if you paid for a first-class seat, stepped onto the plane with quiet pride, and a stranger looked at you as if you didn't belong there? What would you do if a flight attendant stood over you, smiling the kind of smile that isn't kindness at all, and said, "Ma'am, we need you to move. Someone more important needs this seat." That's what happened to Dr. Vanessa Clarke, a black CEO, a woman who built her success with steady hands and a calm heart. A woman who had every right to be exactly where she was sitting. In that moment, she faced a choice: swallow the insult like so many have done before, or show the world what quiet power really looks like. And now I want to ask you, if it happened to you in a plane, in an office, in your own life, would you shrink to make others comfortable, or stand up without raising your voice for your own dignity? Take a breath, because this story will make you feel something deep, something familiar, and maybe something healing. Before we begin, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It helps us bring more real human stories to you. The winter air in Boston had a way of slipping under the skin even when you were indoors. At Logan International Airport, the wind rattled against the glass walls of Terminal B, sending tiny vibrations through the metal beams overhead. Inside, however, the terminal buzzed with warm lights, rolling suitcases, and the familiar scent of coffee drifting from a kiosk near Gate 37. Travelers wrapped in scarves shuffled past one another, each carrying their own burdens, their own reasons for taking to the sky. Dr. Vanessa Clarke stood quietly near the boarding door, a leather carry-on in one hand and a tablet tucked under her arm. She was dressed simply the way people who no longer felt a need to prove anything dressed. A charcoal wool coat that hugged her shoulders, a soft blue blouse, black slacks that moved easily when she walked. A calm presence, nothing about her screaming for attention. But if someone looked closely enough, really looked, they would notice her eyes first: warm, observant, patient, the kind of eyes that had seen much more than she ever said out loud. The boarding agent scanned her pass with a polite smile. "Good evening, Dr. Clarke. Enjoy your flight." Vanessa nodded softly, the corners of her mouth lifting. "Thank you," hoping for a quiet one. "First class should treat you well tonight," the agent said cheerfully. Seat 1A. A pod that turned into a fully flat bed. A full meal service. Privacy. Warm light. And most importantly, a few hours to gather her thoughts before the biggest meeting of her year. She stepped onto the jet bridge, the familiar hum beneath her feet, and entered the aircraft. The cabin smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and new upholstery. First class glowed in soft amber light, each suite warmly lit like a small private retreat. Passengers were taking photos, storing luggage, settling into their seats. Vanessa slid into seat 1A, exhaling slowly. She rested her carry-on beside her legs and placed her tablet on the small side table. For the first time that day, her body felt a moment of stillness. She looked out the window at the runway lights blinking in the distance. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp, she would meet with Western Airlines board to finalize the $700 million contract between her company AeroShield Systems and the airline. A deal that would overhaul their entire data security infrastructure. Years of research, months of negotiations, hundreds of sleepless nights, and the last 72 hours spent prepping a flawless presentation. She deserved this moment of calm. But calm rarely lasts long for women like her. It started with the soft, hurried clicks of heels against the floor. The sound of someone approaching with purpose, not courtesy. Vanessa looked up. A flight attendant with sharp features and a perfectly pressed uniform stopped in front of her seat. Her name tag read Kendra Walsh. Her expression was restrained, polite in appearance, but stiff around the edges. "Mom," Kendra began, her voice tight. "I need you to stand." Vanessa blinked, unsure she heard correctly. Sorry. What was that?" Kendra's smile stretched thinner. "Seat 1A needs to be reassigned. I need you to stand, so we can seat a priority passenger." The words landed like cold water on Vanessa's shoulders. "I believe there must be some mistake." Vanessa kept her voice low and warm, the way her mother used to speak when trying to hold her dignity in difficult spaces. She reached for her boarding pass on the small counter beside her. "This is my seat. Seat 1A. Before she could hand it over, someone stepped into the suite. A man, early 50s, white, with the crisp look of someone used to being accommodated without question. His coat draped neatly over his arm, and a silver pin glinted on his lapel. He placed one hand on the divider wall of her suite, as though already claiming the space. Evening, he said casually, barely glancing at Vanessa. I was told this seat is available. Kendra nodded toward him with a practiced smile. Mr. Ellison, we will have you settled in just a moment. Vanessa felt the shift in the air. The man didn't seem malicious, but he seemed certain of something. Certain of where he belonged, and just as certain of where she did not. I'm sorry, Vanessa repeated, her tone steady, but there truly must be a misunderstanding. Kendra leaned in, slightly lowering her voice. Mom, this is a priority reassignment protocol. He is a platinum elite corporate partner with Western Airlines. We need this seat. The way she said, he sounded heavier than just gender, as if it carried an entire hierarchy behind it. Vanessa felt her throat tighten, not from anger, but from something older. A weariness she had learned to hide since childhood. The quiet understanding that some battles, if fought loudly, would be turned against her. She could almost hear her mother's voice from years ago. Baby, you were born in a world where they see you twice before they see you once. First your skin, then your gender, then maybe you. Vanessa inhaled, slowly steadying herself. I booked this seat 6 weeks ago. There is no protocol that allows displacement of a confirmed first-class passenger without an operational reason. Kendra stiffened. Mom, this is standard. Mr. Ellison needs the seat because he is one of our partner executives. Business class should still be comfortable for you. Business class. Comfortable. She felt the cabin watching. A few passengers looked away quickly, not wanting to be caught witnessing something uncomfortable. Others pretended to swipe on their phones, but she could feel their eyes flicking toward her. Mark Ellison, the man who now hovered over the suite, sighed impatiently. Look, he muttered, I have a connecting flight to Seattle after this. I need the rest. Let's not make this complicated. Vanessa looked at him, then at Kendra. There it was. The assumption. The invisible sorting of who belonged in luxury and who belonged in what was left. She weighed her options in seconds. Raise her voice and become who they expected her to be. Swallow her pride and let this happen again to the next woman who looked like her. Or step back quietly now and choose a different kind of battlefield. Vanessa stood, slowly, deliberately, not apologizing, not shrinking. Kendra exhaled with visible relief, as if avoiding a scene was more important than avoiding injustice. Thank you for your understanding, she said, already, ushering Mark Ellison into the seat. But Vanessa wasn't giving them her understanding. She was giving them a moment she planned to remember. As she stepped into the aisle, she noticed a young flight attendant near the galley. Latina, early 20s, her name tag reading Emily Reyes. Emily's eyes flicked between Vanessa and the first-class suite with something that looked like guilt or sadness or recognition. Emily whispered softly when Vanessa passed. Mom, I'm really sorry. This wasn't protocol. They shouldn't have done that. The words stung in their honesty. Vanessa gave a small nod, her voice barely above a murmur. Thank you for saying that. The walk to business class felt longer than the aisle itself. Her mind replayed every boardroom where she had been mistaken for an assistant, every gala where guests assumed she was staff, every contract negotiation where someone explained her own product back to her as if she were a child. Seat 14C waited for her at the front of business class. A nice seat, spacious, clean, but it wasn't 1A. And it wasn't the seat she had earned. She sat down, exhaled, rested her hands in her lap. For a moment, she let herself feel the hurt tightening behind her ribs. The small shame that didn't belong to her but had been placed on her shoulders anyway. The quiet humiliation that black women in America learned to hide from the world because the world insisted it was harmless. A business traveler across the aisle, a woman in her 60s with soft gray curls, watched her with warm eyes. She didn't speak. She just nodded as if to say, I saw it. And it wasn't right. Vanessa nodded back. The smallest of acknowledgments. But enough. Her tablet buzzed in her lap. A message from her CFO. Vanessa, reminder. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Western Air Board review for the 700M contract. They're expecting full confirmation. Vanessa stared at the message. $700 million. A system that controlled over half of the airline's security infrastructure. A deal the airline needed much more than she did. She leaned back slowly in her seat. And that was the moment, a quiet, private moment, when her sorrow shifted into something colder. Something sharper. Not revenge. but clarity. The kind of clarity that builds in a person who has learned to wait, to choose the right moment to speak, or the right button to press. A soft smile touched her lips, not sweet, not cruel, just certain. She opened her laptop. The cabin lights dimmed for boarding, and the engines outside began their slow rumble. Tomorrow, they would see her clearly, whether they wanted to or not. The aircraft door had closed with a soft thud, and the murmurs inside the cabin faded into a collective hush. Somewhere behind the curtain, the first-class cabin glowed in warm gold, a world of champagne flutes and whispered conversations. But in business class, row 14 hummed with a different kind of energy. Not loud, not tense, just aware. Dr. Vanessa Clarke set her laptop aside and leaned back in her seat. The seatbelt sign blinked overhead as the plane prepared for pushback. Her fingers tapped gently against her thigh, tracing patterns born from old habits. Patterns she had picked up in long nights of thinking through problems she could never say aloud. Patterns she learned when she realized the world didn't always listen to her words, but it always noticed her silence. She closed her eyes for a moment. She had been here before, not on this plane, not in this seat, but in this feeling. The feeling of being told without being told you don't belong here. And every time she had learned to breathe through it, not because she was weak, but because she understood something most people never had: to that silence can be a refuge or a weapon depending on the moment. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "Excuse me, ma'am. May I offer you a drink before takeoff?" It was Emily, the younger flight attendant who had quietly apologized earlier. She stood with her hands clasped, her expression gentle, her voice careful. Vanessa looked up. "Water is fine. Thank you, Emily." Emily nodded, giving a small smile before stepping away. Across the aisle, the older woman with gray curls, Mrs. Julia Monroe, watched everything with the calm attentiveness of someone who understood more than she let on. After a moment, she leaned slightly toward Vanessa. "You handled that with grace," she said softly. Vanessa offered a polite smile. "Sometimes grace is the only thing we can hold on to." Julia nodded knowingly. "Sometimes, but sometimes, grace is what they expect, and decency is what they should fear when it finally runs out." The words settled between them like a quiet truth. Vanessa didn't respond, but her chest tightened, not painfully, just firmly, like someone was reminding her of her own strength. Moments later, the engines roared to life. The soft hum under the floorboards turned into a steady vibration as the plane pushed back from the gate. Business class lights dimmed. Seat belts clicked. Phones switched into airplane mode. Vanessa picked up her laptop again. She didn't open it yet. Instead, she stared at the blank screen for a long moment, her reflection staring back. The face of a woman tired of pretending that these things didn't matter. A notification flashed across the screen the moment she lifted the lid. A message from her Chief Technology Officer, Aaron Brooks. "Vanessa, Western Air wants everything finalized by 9 a.m. Their team is pushing aggressive timelines. Let me know once you land. We need your final authorization." Final authorization. The irony wasn't lost on her. She typed a short response. "Working on it. We'll update after landing." But as she pressed, send, another thought surfaced uninvited. They think they hold the leverage tomorrow. She sat still for a moment. Very still. Then a memory flashed. A younger version of herself, 24 years old, standing in the server room of the old startup she once worked for. Back when she still believed that talent alone could protect her. That if she worked hard enough, the world would eventually recognize her. It was late at night, and she had been troubleshooting a system breach alone. Her supervisor had walked in, eyes scanning the room without really seeing her. He had assumed she was an intern, had asked her if she knew how to contact the real team. She had smiled politely that night, but something inside her had hardened, not into anger, into resolve. A resolve she carried now as she opened an encrypted window on her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She knew the system inside Western Air better than anyone. AeroShield Systems had built every layer of security that protected the airline's network from customer data to ground operations. The integration wasn't active yet, but preliminary hooks were already in place. That meant she had access. Not full control, but enough. Enough to send a message. Enough to choose her battlefield. But as she stared at the blinking cursor, uncertainty crept in. Is this too far? Is this the right moment? Am I doing this for dignity or for pride? She closed the laptop again. Pressing it shut felt like pressing the brakes on an impulse that was both powerful and dangerous. The overhead lights flickered as the aircraft taxied toward the runway. Outside the window, runway lights stretched endlessly into the night. Inside, Vanessa's heart tapped a quieter rhythm, one she had learned to trust even when her mind argued against it. Emily returned with a glass of water. Anything else before takeoff? No. Thank you, Emily. Emily hesitated, then lowered her voice. Mom, I just want to say, I saw what happened. It wasn't right. I wish. Vanessa raised a gentle hand. You don't need to explain, and you don't need to fix it. Thank you for your kindness. Emily nodded, her eyes soft before she stepped away. A moment later, Kendra, the senior flight attendant, appeared near the curtain separating first class. She caught sight of Vanessa and quickly looked away, adjusting a tray that didn't need adjusting. The guilt in her shoulders was unmistakable. Vanessa noticed, but she didn't look away. The plane paused at the runway threshold. Engines humming deeper, cabin lights dimming further. In the corner of her eye, Vanessa saw movement, passengers reaching for magazines, adjusting headphones, waiting for liftoff. But her gaze drifted forward, past business class, past the curtain, into the first-class suite, where Mark Ellison now reclined comfortably in the seat that had been hers. The seat she had booked, the seat she had earned. She watched him laugh with a flight attendant, watched him toast a glass of champagne, watched him exist in a world where no one questioned his right to be there. A quiet ache rose in her chest. Not envy, not anger, recognition. A recognition she had felt too many times. He doesn't even know what he took from me, and worse, he doesn't care. She turned back toward the window, the engines roaring louder. Then her phone buzzed once. A message. She considered ignoring it until she saw the name. Thomas Rayner, CEO of Western Airlines. Looking forward to tomorrow, Dr. Clarke. Our team is excited to finalize the partnership. Safe travels. She stared at the message. A polite note. Professional, courteous, and proof he had no idea what his own staff had just done to her. A bitter smile touched her lips. Professional, courteous, equal, on paper. But in practice, she was still the one being asked to step aside. She typed a reply, but didn't send it. Instead, she opened a secure field on her laptop. A small one. A diagnostic check. Not a shutdown. Not an attack. Just a whisper into the system. A whisper only her team would recognize. A whisper that would require Western Air to listen. Her fingers moved deliberately, calmly, without anger. This wasn't revenge. This was clarity. She entered the command, paused, then pressed send. The aircraft began its takeoff roll. The engines roared. The cabin pushed back. Lights streaked across the window. And in that moment, as the plane lifted into the winter sky, Vanessa Clarke felt something shift inside her. Not satisfaction, not triumph. Alignment. Tomorrow they will see me clearly, whether they wanted to or not. The aircraft leveled off above the clouds, its engines settling into a steady hum. Cabin lights brightened slightly as passengers unbuckled their belts and reached for headphones, blankets, or laptops. The sky outside the window was a soft, endless navy blue, broken only by the occasional shimmer of distant stars. But inside the business class cabin, tension lingered in the air, quiet, invisible but present. Dr. Vanessa Clarke sat with her laptop open again, though she wasn't typing. She stared at a diagnostic window, showing a series of digital threads running silently in the background. Each thread represented a check, a pulse sent through Western Air's preliminary integration pathways. Harmless, gentle, but unmistakable to anyone monitoring the system. She took a slow breath. This wasn't anger. This wasn't retaliation. This was her sending a message: I see everything, and I can turn the lights on or off when I choose. Her hands rested on the keyboard still for a moment, long enough for doubt to whisper through her mind. Is this too far? Is this the right way? Is there another option? Her mother's voice surfaced in her memory, warm, steady, the voice that had guided her through more storms than she could count. You do not have to shout to be heard, baby. You just have to know what buttons matter. Vanessa lifted her chin slightly. She knew exactly which buttons mattered. A notification slid across her screen. System alert. Irregular data request detected. Source AeroShield Beta Integration Node. She didn't flinch. That meant someone at Western Air was already noticing the whispers she had sent. Good. Let them wonder. Let them ask questions. Let them remember that the black woman they pushed out of a premium seat without hesitation was the same woman holding the keys to their future security. She closed the alert calmly. A shadow fell over her table. Dr. Clarke, may I trouble you for a moment? Vanessa looked up. Mrs. Julia Monroe, the older woman across the aisle, was leaning closer without intruding, holding a paper napkin in her hand like she wasn't sure what else to do with it. Of course, Vanessa said softly. Julia hesitated before speaking. Her voice came out low, compassionate, and laced with a kind of shame that didn't belong to her. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what happened earlier. I know it's not my place, but I saw it, and it wasn't right. Vanessa's expression softened. It's kind of you to say that. Julia shook her head. No, it's the least I can say. I've seen this sort of thing before. Too many times. My late husband was black, Navy officer, brilliant man. And still, there were moments in his life when people made him feel smaller than he was. Vanessa inhaled quietly. I'm sorry he went through that. He handled it with such dignity. Julia said, eyes glistening slightly. Sometimes I think dignity is a heavy weight to carry. Those words circled through Vanessa's mind long after Julia returned to her seat. A heavy weight. Yes, it was. Before she could fall too deep into thought, Emily approached again. Dr. Clarke, she said gently, the captain would like to see you when you're ready. He said there's something he wants to discuss. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. Now, Emily nodded. It sounded important. Vanessa closed her laptop and stood slowly, her heart tightening not in fear but in anticipation. She followed Emily through the business class cabin toward the galley, the curtains whispering shut behind them. Captain Robert Hayes waited there, a tall man in his late 40s with calm eyes and a stiff, concerned expression. He gave a respectful nod when she approached. Dr. Clarke, thank you for coming. Of course, she replied evenly. What's going on? Captain Hayes glanced toward the closed curtain before speaking, lowering his voice. We've received an unusual notice from our operations center. Something about a system verification sequence being triggered through the AeroShield integration. They're asking if you initiated it. Vanessa met his gaze without flinching. I ran a diagnostics check. Nothing more. The captain hesitated. Is this something we should be concerned about? That depends, she said carefully. Is your system behaving normally? For now, yes, but they're asking us to report any irregularities. Vanessa studied him for a moment. He didn't look angry. He looked wary, protective of his crew, protective of his passengers. Doing his job. She respected that. I assure you, Captain, she said gently, if there were any danger you'd know. My diagnostic triggers only when something in the system needs attention. And does something need attention? He asked quietly. Vanessa held his gaze. Captain, something always needs attention. But tonight your aircraft is completely safe. Hayes nodded slowly. Thank you for the reassurance. A pause. And, I heard about the seating issue earlier. Vanessa's jaw tensed, but she kept her tone neutral. It's been addressed. Hayes shook his head slightly. It shouldn't have happened. It reflects on us, on me, even if I wasn't aware. For the first time since boarding, Vanessa felt a small warmth settle in her chest. Thank you for saying that, she replied sincerely. Hayes offered a polite nod. If anything changes with the system, please let me know directly. Of course. As she returned to her seat, she passed the curtain that separated business and first class. Through a small opening, she saw Mark Ellison laughing, lifted champagne glass in hand, completely oblivious to the shift happening beneath him. A whisper of resolve tightened inside her. Not spite, not vengeance, clarity. When she sat down again, Julia Monroe leaned over softly. Everything all right, dear? Yes, Vanessa said, though her voice carried the weight of something deeper. Everything is in motion. Julia smiled knowingly. That sounds like the beginning of a change. Vanessa turned back to her laptop, her fingers moving more confidently this time. She entered a second command into the system. Not a freeze, not a shutdown, just another whisper. Another pulse. Another reminder. And then, a faint vibration. Her phone buzzed. A new message appeared. Operations alert, unexpected restrictions detected in Western Air regional scheduling nodes. Inquiry initiated. Please confirm authorization. Vanessa exhaled slowly. She didn't smile. Not yet. This wasn't triumph. This was the sound of a system learning who held the keys. She typed a short response to her team. Monitor everything. Do not intervene. Let Western Air come to us. Seconds later, her screen flashed again. A number she did not expect. A direct line. Thomas Rayner, Western Air's CEO. Her pulse flickered. She didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, she powered down her laptop, folded her hands in her lap, and closed her eyes. Not to avoid the call, but to choose the moment. Everything had its moment, and hers was coming. At 38000 feet, the world below felt impossibly distant, tiny pinpoints of light scattered across the dark canvas of the Earth. The aircraft drifted smoothly through the night sky, its metal body quiet except for the steady drone of engines cutting through cold air, but inside the cabin something else hummed beneath the surface. A different kind of movement, a shift beginning to take shape. Dr. Vanessa Clarke sat perfectly still in her business-class seat, phone screen glowing faintly against the dim cabin lighting. Her fingertips hovered over the call notification she still hadn't answered. Thomas Rayner, CEO of Western Airlines. The man who, in less than 9 hours, expected her to walk into a glossy boardroom and sign away a $700 million contract. He didn't know yet that she was no longer in the mood to be silent. But he would, soon. Across the aisle, Mrs. Julia Monroe watched her with a soft kind of worry in her eyes. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, sensing that this was a moment Vanessa needed for herself. Vanessa leaned back, exhaling through her nose. The hum in her mind was louder now, an edge of tension mixing with clarity, the kind of clarity that forced a woman to choose who she was going to be when the world pushed her aside. The pushback earlier had felt small to outside eyes, but the sting had layers. It was never just a seat. It was every seat she had been told she didn't deserve. Every room she had entered where someone questioned her presence. Every accomplishment followed by a quiet assumption that someone else, someone lighter, someone male, had done the real work. She closed her eyes briefly. Stay calm, Vanessa. Purpose first, emotion later. When she opened her eyes again, a flight attendant stood beside her. Not Kendra. Emily. Her voice was low and uncertain. Dr. Clarke, the captain asked if you'd be willing to take his call through the cabin phone whenever you're ready. He thought it might be more private for you. Vanessa nodded, appreciating the care behind the offer. Thank you, Emily. I'll do that shortly. Emily lingered another moment, then asked softly, Is everything okay? Vanessa gave her a small but sincere smile. It will be. Emily nodded before stepping away. In a quiet corner of Western Air's Boston Operations Center, red notifications flashed across a massive monitoring screen. A night shift systems engineer named Kyle Rhodes leaned forward in his chair, squinting at lines of data he didn't expect to see. What in the... He zoomed in. Unauthorized verification echo, source AeroShield integration node. Kyle's stomach tightened. He clicked deeper, then paled. Linda, he called out to his shift supervisor. A tall woman with short hair and the energy of someone who had carried the airline through more crises than she cared to count walked over. What is it now? She sighed, sipping lukewarm coffee. Kyle swallowed. Something's pinging our scheduling nodes. It's not an attack, more like a diagnostic sequence. But the authorization code is routed through the AeroShield integration. Linda raised an eyebrow. So you're telling me the system we haven't activated yet is activating itself? No, Kyle said quickly. Someone is activating it. Linda frowned. Who has the clearance for that? Kyle pointed to the screen. Authorization, key V. Clarke. Linda froze. As in, the Clarke, the CEO. Kyle confirmed. Yes. Linda let out a very slow breath. Oh hell. Vanessa glanced once more at her phone before finally rising from her seat. The cabin was dim, peaceful, and unaware of the storm gathering outside these walls. She walked quietly toward the galley where the cabin phone was mounted. Emily stepped back respectfully, giving Vanessa space. Vanessa pressed the button. Captain Hayes, she said softly. A second later, his voice came through steady and low. Dr. Clarke, thank you for taking this. How can I help, Captain? I received word from our operations team and from headquarters. A pause. I understand you haven't taken Mr. Rayner's call. That's correct, Vanessa replied. I don't want to overstep, the captain continued, but he asked me to let you know he'll stay available all night if needed. And he asked if there was an immediate concern with the system. Vanessa considered the question, what to reveal and what not to. Then she spoke, her voice calm, almost gentle. Captain, the system isn't malfunctioning. But it is. Responding. Responding to what he asked quietly. To a pattern, Vanessa said. One your team might not see yet. But I see it. Because it isn't just technical. The captain didn't answer immediately, but Vanessa sensed he understood more than he said. Should I be worried, he finally asked. No, Vanessa said plainly. Not for the safety of this flight. But Western Air does need to understand what is happening. There was a long silence on the other end. Then the captain said softly, I'm sorry you were treated the way you were tonight. That wasn't right. The sincerity in his voice surprised her. It wasn't corporate. It wasn't rehearsed. It was human. Thank you, she replied quietly. If you need anything, he added, you come to me. I will. She hung up. Emily stepped forward a bit. Would you like a moment alone, Dr. Clarke? No, Vanessa said, steady again. I'm all right. Her phone buzzed once. Then again. Then a third time. 3 consecutive messages. From Aaron Brooks, Vanessa, Western Air just called our emergency line. Something about a live verification hitting their scheduling network. Another message. They're asking if it's us. I told them I needed to check with you. And a third. They sound nervous. What's the plan? Vanessa inhaled deeply, feeling the moment tighten around her like a thread pulled slowly through fabric. She typed back, monitor only. No action. Let them call again. She hit send. Then she looked up. Across the aisle, Julia Monroe studied her with a perceptive gaze. Another storm? Julia asked quietly. Vanessa smiled faintly. Maybe? Or maybe a sunrise, Julia offered gently. Vanessa considered that. A sunrise can look like a fire at first. Julia chuckled softly. That's true. Mark Ellison tapped angrily at his phone. His email wasn't sending. His Western Air app kept freezing. His messages wouldn't load. He huffed dramatically, pressing the call button. Kendra appeared. Yes, Mr. Ellison, my Wi-Fi is useless, he snapped. I need this fixed. I'll check with the system, she said, flustered. Hurry, he barked. I have real work to do. Vanessa overheard him and felt something shift inside her, not satisfaction but clarity. He had no idea that his real work depended entirely on the woman he had casually displaced without thought. And that was the problem. Men like him didn't feel consequences until they tripped over them. At 1:42 p.m. EST, the secure line in CEO Thomas Rayner's office buzzed again. Rayner, still in a crisp suit, though the hour was late, answered instantly. This is Rayner. Sir, Linda, the operations supervisor, said nervously. The system is still verifying across all nodes. No errors yet, but it's disrupting internal scheduling flows. And Clarke hasn't responded. Rayner exhaled sharply. He paced once across his office. I want full visibility on every touch point, he ordered. And get the board on standby for a 6 a.m. update. If Clarke is signaling something, we need to interpret it correctly. What exactly is she signaling, sir? Linda asked. Rayner didn't answer. Because he knew. He understood exactly what this was. A warning. A quiet, controlled warning from a woman who did not raise her voice but did not accept disrespect. He looked out the office window at the Boston skyline, glowing in the darkness. Prepare for a conversation tomorrow, he said quietly. It won't be a normal one. Vanessa opened her laptop once more. A new alert blinked softly. Western Air requesting verification override. Awaiting authorization. She didn't press anything. She didn't type. She simply watched it. The quiet hum of the plane wrapped around her like a cocoon. And for the first time since boarding, she allowed herself a slow breath of relief. Not because the matter was resolved, but because something inside her felt aligned again. Power was not loud. Power did not scream. Power was choosing calmly, firmly when to answer a call, and when to let the world wait. Vanessa closed her eyes. Tomorrow they would talk. Tonight she would rest. The cabin had quieted into the soft, familiar rhythm of an overnight flight. Somewhere in first class, a passenger snored gently. A baby murmured in economy 2 cabins back. The faint clink of glasses from the galley echoed briefly, then faded. The aircraft moved steadily beneath a blanket of stars, cutting through the night air like a silent arrow heading west. But inside Dr. Vanessa Clarke's silence did not mean stillness. She opened her eyes again, her thoughts sharper than the thin line of moonlight gliding across the cabin floor. The hum of the engines had become almost meditative, a backdrop to the quiet storm building in her chest. She turned her head slightly. Across the aisle, Mrs. Julia Monroe was asleep, now her head tilted gracefully against her headrest. Her hands folded in her lap like she had learned decades ago to rest with dignity, even in uncomfortable places. Vanessa admired that. Resting with dignity. That was a lesson she had been forced to learn too early in life. She pulled the thin cabin blanket over herself, though she wasn't cold. It was simply comforting, a small human gesture she allowed herself. Her phone buzzed again. She sighed softly, expecting another systems alert or a follow-up from her CTO, Aaron Brooks. But instead, the notification name surprised her. From Mom. Are you up in the air now? You know, I pray for you every time you fly. Call me when you land, baby. The message hit her differently, round, warm grounding. It drew her inward into a tenderness she didn't often allow herself to feel. She typed back, safe, Mom, I'll call when I land. I love you. Her mother would never know, at least not tonight, about the storm brewing inside Western Air's operations center. She didn't need that worry. She had carried enough worry as it was raising Vanessa and her two brothers in a neighborhood that demanded resilience from sunrise to sunset. Another memory surfaced: Vanessa, at 13, sitting on the back steps as her mother braided her hair. Her mother's voice was gentle but firm. You're going to walk into rooms? I'll never walk into baby. But don't think the rooms will always welcome you. Sometimes, they'll ask you to step aside even when you belong at the table. Vanessa blinked the memory away, breathing out slowly. Her mother had been preparing her for that first-class moment long before it happened. She shifted in her seat, glancing at her phone again. 3 missed calls, 1 voicemail, all from Thomas Rayner. She tapped the voicemail, letting it play quietly against her ear. Dr. Clarke, this is Rayner. I believe we need to discuss the activity we're seeing on our systems. Call me at your earliest convenience. I hope everything is all right. Professional, measured, concerned, but not apologetic. Not yet. Vanessa deleted the voicemail without responding. Captain Hayes adjusted the controls and glanced at the screen, showing communication logs. Another message from headquarters blinked red. He frowned. Second request for system verification status, he murmured. His first officer, a younger pilot named Trent Willis, raised an eyebrow. Something big happening down there, Hayes hesitated before replying. Feels like it. Willis leaned back in his seat. Do you think it has anything to do with that passenger you talked to earlier? Hayes hesitated. Maybe. And if it does, then headquarters needs to tread carefully. He didn't elaborate, but the first officer understood the tone well enough. At Western Air headquarters, a senior IT analyst named Marcus Lee rubbed his temples. It was nearly midnight, and the operations room buzzed like a hive under stress. Are the delays spreading? Rayner asked, standing behind him. Marcus swallowed. Yes, sir. Not canceling anything. Not harming anything. But the system is requiring manual clearance for every outgoing schedule. It's like someone tapped the brakes on the entire network. And the trigger. Marcus pointed to the screen. Aero Shield integration node. Again. Rayner ran a hand through his hair. Clarke is sending a message. What do you want us to do? Nothing, Rayner said. But be ready at dawn. A glass of water appeared beside Vanessa's elbow. She looked up and saw Emily again. You've been awake a while, Emily whispered. Thought you might want this. Thank you, Vanessa said gently. Emily didn't walk away immediately. After a moment, she added softly, Do you ever get used to it? Vanessa blinked. Used to what? Emily glanced toward first class, then back to Vanessa. That kind of treatment. What they did to you. Vanessa studied her. There was no malice in the question. Only a young woman trying to understand the world she had stepped into. No, Vanessa replied softly. You don't get used to being underestimated. You just get better at choosing your response. Emily nodded slowly, absorbing every word. But, Vanessa added, you also learn that sometimes silence is loud. Emily looked puzzled. What do you mean? Vanessa smiled faintly. You'll see. Emily left quietly, but her expression said she would remember those words. A chime sounded through the cabin. Not an emergency tone, just a soft announcement cue. Vanessa looked up. Captain Hayes spoke calmly through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to inform you that our flight will experience a slight operational update upon arrival. There is no cause for concern. Our approach and landing remain on schedule." Passengers stirred. Whispers floated through the cabin. "What kind of update? Is something wrong? Is it weather?" Vanessa exhaled slowly. This was the first public ripple from the storm she'd started. She closed her eyes briefly. "Stay steady, Vanessa. This is the moment right before the hinge turns." When she opened her eyes again, Kendra, the senior flight attendant, approached her seat. Her posture was rigid, her smile forced. "Dr. Clarke," she said tightly. "The captain asked me to check if you need anything for comfort." Vanessa studied her face, her shoulders, the discomfort she was trying to hide. "No thank you, Ms. Walsh. I'm fine." Kendra nodded, but her jaw tightened like a woman, aware the ground was shifting beneath her feet. She walked away quickly. Vanessa watched her go, not with satisfaction, but with insight. People often acted in harmful ways not because they were cruel, but because the system they served rewarded the wrong instincts. Tonight, that system was feeling its first consequences. This time from Aaron. "Vanessa, they're calling again. They're asking if you intend to trigger a full lockdown." She typed back, "No, not unless they force my hand." Then, another text from Aaron. "Do you want me to prepare statements? Legal briefs?" She typed, "No. Let them come to us." The silence is the message. She set her phone down. Her heartbeat slowed. Steady, controlled. The way it always did when she stepped into the center of a negotiation. She knew she could win. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to posture. It was enough to hold the system still. She sipped the water Emily had brought her. The coolness grounded her. Across the aisle, Julia Monroe had awakened and watched her quietly. "Child," Julia said softly, "you look like a woman deciding something important." "I am," Vanessa replied. Julia nodded thoughtfully. "Well, decide it with your whole heart. Decisions shape futures." Vanessa smiled gently. "They do." A small voice inside her whispered, "What if this escalates too far? What if the board interprets it as a threat? What if this costs everything you've built?" But another voice stronger rose up. "What if they walk into tomorrow's meeting thinking they can mistreat you and still profit from your brilliance? What if they never learn unless someone forces them to look? What if this is the moment you teach them who you are?" Her breath shivered softly. She had been polite all her life. Professional, measured, reasonable. But reason didn't stop what happened tonight. She opened her laptop once more, just to check the system. A new alert appeared. Western Air requesting direct communication with System Administrator V. Clarke. Urgent. Awaiting response. Vanessa closed the laptop again. Tomorrow, they could wait until tomorrow. Tonight, the sky was hers. She rested her head back, breathing in slow and deep as the aircraft glided through the night. For the first time in hours, she felt a small peace settle in her bones. A storm was waiting on the ground, but she was ready for it. The flight had settled into its middle hours, the stretch, when most passengers drifted into an uneasy sleep, when the cabin lights dimmed to a soft blue haze, and when time seemed to let go of its usual urgency. The aircraft floated calmly above the country's sleeping cities, tracing a silent path toward the west coast. But inside Dr. Vanessa Clarke's chest, time was anything but calm. She had not closed her eyes once. Not because she couldn't rest, but because the world below would not let her. Another faint buzz vibrated against her thigh. She didn't need to look. She knew who it was. Rayner again. She left the phone untouched. Across the aisle, Mrs. Julia Monroe opened her eyes as if her intuition was tuned to Vanessa's energy. She studied the younger woman's expression with quiet care. "You don't have to answer every knock on your door," Julia whispered gently. Vanessa turned her head slightly. "Sometimes I feel like I do." Julia shook her head. "No, dear. Sometimes silence is the only way people learn that they've crossed a line." Vanessa breathed out a small, tired laugh. "Seems like tonight has been one lesson after another." Julia smiled sadly. "It usually is for women like us." It was again the unspoken understanding, a recognition that spanned generations. It steadied Vanessa more than she expected. She reached for her laptop. The metal felt cold under her fingertips. She opened the device, and the screen lit up, pulling her back into the technical world she controlled with effortless mastery. A new alert pulsed across the top corner: Western Air Emergency Ops System-wide Inquiry Pending. Request immediate callback. Her jaw tightened. They weren't panicking yet, but they were close. She opened the system status dashboard. Every Aero Shield diagnostic thread she had initiated remained perfectly within operational boundaries. Nothing harmful, nothing dangerous, nothing unethical. Just visible. Visible in a way Western Air could not ignore. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. A whisper inside her balanced between certainty and caution. Is this enough? Or do I need to push further? The internal debate rose again, the same tug of war that had followed her since the moment she stepped aside for Mark Ellison's entitlement in Seat 1A. A push is only forceful when the other side refuses to see the truth, her mother's voice echoed in memory. And Western Air had refused to see the truth long before tonight. She closed the laptop again. Not yet. This moment wasn't for the computer. It was for the call she had avoided long enough. She rose quietly from her seat, ignoring the heaviness in her chest. Emily, standing near the galley, noticed her movement immediately. "Dr. Clarke," Emily whispered, "is everything okay?" "Yes," Vanessa said gently. "I just need the cabin phone again." Emily nodded and led her to the small jump seat area near the forward galley. The lighting was dim, warming the edges of the metal walls. Emily stepped aside to give her space. Vanessa lifted the phone, pressed the code, waited. 2 rings. Then a voice answered, low, cautious, too calm to be calm. "Dr. Clarke, thank you for returning the call. Thomas Rayner, CEO, negotiator, a man used to control." She didn't respond immediately, letting the silence settle. A silence that forced him to fill the void. "I've been informed," he continued, "that several irregular diagnostics are affecting our internal scheduling. No safety risks, but they're significant." Her voice, when it came, was smooth as cool water. "They are only significant because you notice them." Rayner hesitated. "Are you saying the actions are intentional?" "Of course they are." A breath caught on his end. "Not shock. Recognition." "I see," he said quietly. "May I ask why?" Vanessa kept her tone steady, unshaken. "You already know why. I want to hear it from you." Another long silence. Then she spoke. "Your staff removed me from Seat 1A tonight. Without protocol, without cause, without respect." Rayner exhaled audibly. "So, this is about the incident earlier." "It's not an incident," Vanessa corrected softly. "It's a pattern, a pause, a pattern Western Air has allowed to repeat. For years. Against people who look like me." Rayner didn't speak for several seconds. When he did, his voice had shifted, less confident, more human. "Dr. Clarke, I am deeply sorry for what happened. I'm still gathering information," but she cut him off, not rudely but firmly. "Mr. Rayner, your employees don't need an investigation to know what they did. And I don't need an apology to know what it meant." The silence that followed was thick enough to feel. Then Rayner tried again, his voice lower this time. "I understand you're upset, but affecting our operational network. A diagnostic check is not harmful," she interrupted again. "It simply reveals what's already weak." Rayner swallowed hard. "Are you trying to send a message before tomorrow's meeting?" The corner of her lips lifted, not in a smile, but in acknowledgement. "Yes, because tomorrow can't happen the way it was planned." Rayner let out a slow breath. "Dr. Clarke, I value this contract. I value your company. But you didn't value me," Vanessa said gently. "Not tonight." Rayner didn't deny it. And that silence was its own admission. "You pushed me out of a seat I paid for, earned and reserved. Your staff saw the color of my skin before they saw my name." Her voice softened further, an edge of vulnerability shining through. "Tell me, Mr. Rayner, do you think a woman who controls your future security should ever feel unsafe on your airline?" Rayner inhaled sharply. "No, she should not. And yet she said I did." The tension on the line tightened visibly. "What do you want from me?" "Dr. Clarke," Vanessa leaned her shoulder against the wall, the cool metal soothing. "I want accountability. Not tomorrow, not in a memo. Tonight." Rayner cleared his throat, his voice wavering. "Define accountability." Vanessa's tone turned calm, focused, precise. "3 things," Rayner whispered, as if bracing himself. I'm listening. 1. She said you will conduct a full audit of all passenger treatment incidents across your fleet for the last 5 years. He didn't argue. 2. She continued you will implement mandatory anti-bias and dignity training for all flight staff. No exceptions. Not even senior crew. Another pause. Understood. And 3. Her voice lowered into steel. You will add a culture accountability clause to tomorrow's contract. My team will draft it. This time, Rayner did not speak. She waited. Finally, he whispered, "Is that all?" "Yes," she said. "For now." A faint creak sounded through the phone. Rayner leaning back in his chair, absorbing the terms. "Then, Dr. Clarke, you have my word. We'll do it." Vanessa straightened. "Good. Because if you didn't," she let the sentence trail off. Rayner finished it for her. "You could freeze our entire network by noon." Vanessa didn't confirm. She didn't need to. Silence confirmed it for her. "We have a lot to talk about tomorrow," Rayner said at last. "We do," Vanessa replied softly. "Thank you for calling," he murmured. She ended the call without replying. Julia Monroe watched her with knowing eyes. "Well," Julia asked. Vanessa settled into her seat, taking a slow breath, a breath that seemed to travel deeper than her lungs. "It's beginning," she said quietly. "The change." Julia smiled. "I thought so." Emily passed by offering Vanessa a warm look, the kind that said she didn't know the details, but understood the weight. For the first time since the plane left Boston, Vanessa closed her eyes briefly, not in worry, but in steady confidence. Tomorrow was coming, and she was ready. The aircraft glided deeper into the night, cutting through a layer of calm so polished it almost felt unreal. Cabin lights were dimmed to a muted amber glow, faint enough for sleep, but warm enough to feel human. Passengers shifted under blankets, the quiet rustling blending with the gentle hum of the engines. But the calm inside Dr. Vanessa Clarke had shifted. The call with CEO Thomas Rayner remained echoing in her mind. Not in a chaotic way, but in a way that made her pulse steady and sharp like the quiet after a door closes behind a difficult decision. She sat straighter, now not rigid, not tense, but aligned, centered, fully aware of what tomorrow would demand from her. Across the aisle, Mrs. Julia Monroe watched her with a soft, knowing gaze, the kind only older women who had survived the world's sharp edges were able to give. "Your shoulders look lighter," Julia whispered. Vanessa smiled faintly. "Maybe because the truth is finally out in the open." "Truth tends to do that," Julia replied, "even when it scares people." Vanessa nodded, letting the moment rest quietly between them. She took a slow breath and closed her eyes for the first proper minute since the plane had taken off. But she wasn't asleep, not even close. Her mind drifted, but not into worry. It drifted into clarity, into questions of purpose, impact, and the heavy responsibility that came with being a woman who held more power than most people realized. It didn't take long before that calm was interrupted. A voice pierced the cabin, sharp, frustrated, entitled. "What do you mean you don't have sparkling water I paid for?" First class. Vanessa's eyes opened. She didn't need to guess. Mark Ellison. Her gaze shifted toward the curtain. Through a thin gap between the fabric she could see him sitting up in seat 1, waving his hand dismissively as Kendra Walsh tried to calm him. Kendra's voice was controlled. "Mr. Ellison, we're simply out of that brand. I can offer. You can offer better service. That's what you can offer." Mark snapped. "Honestly, what is wrong with this airline tonight?" Vanessa didn't move. She simply watched. Kendra tried again. "Sir, I'm doing all I can." "Well, it's not enough," Mark barked loudly enough for half the cabin to hear. Several passengers shifted, uncomfortable. A few murmured under their breath. But Mark didn't care. He was the kind of man who was used to the world bending around his voice. Julia sighed softly beside Vanessa. "That man doesn't know how small he looks," she murmured. "No," Vanessa agreed quietly. "He doesn't." Then, something unexpected happened. Emily, the younger attendant, gentle and soft-spoken, stepped into first class. Vanessa couldn't hear her words, but she saw the courage behind them. The way Emily positioned herself like a shield between Kendra and Mark. Emily spoke calmly, firmly, with more backbone than Vanessa had seen from her earlier. Mark glared at her, scoffed, and threw his hands up dramatically. "You know what? Forget it. This entire airline is incompetent tonight." Vanessa caught Kendra's eyes for the briefest moment. The older attendant looked shaken, embarrassed, unsure. This night had stripped away her usual control. Vanessa looked down. Something in her tightened, not anger, not spite, but a recognition of the imbalance. How quickly entitlement could turn cruel. How easily authority warped when people believed consequences never applied to them. She had experienced it her whole life. And Western Air had just experienced it tonight. She exhaled slowly, grounding herself. Then came the sound she had been expecting. Ping. A cabin announcement tone. Captain Hayes' voice filled the aircraft. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We will be experiencing a minor operational pause upon landing due to scheduling issues. We appreciate your patience. Vanessa studied the reaction. A few passengers frowned. Some sighed. One muttered, "This airline again." And Mark nearly exploded. What operational pause? This is unbelievable, he shouted, pressing his call button repeatedly. Kendra approached him again, visibly exhausted. Sir, please keep your voice down. Oh no, Mark said loudly. I will not keep my voice down while I'm inconvenienced like this. Do you know who I am? The question echoed across the cabin like a cliché from a bad movie. But it was real, and the entitlement behind it was thick enough to choke on. Emily flinched. Kendra stiffened, and the entire cabin grew still. Vanessa felt something shift in her chest, a quiet click of clarity. This is what they defend. This is what they accommodate. This is what they chose over me. She folded her arms gently across her lap, but she didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence had already done the work tonight. Captain Hayes received another message from operations. Western Air, all flights delayed 7 minutes due to system verifications. Cause AeroShield diagnostic echo persists. Hayes rubbed his temples. What is headquarters doing to fix this, he asked. The first officer shrugged. No clue. But they're clearly not in control of the situation. Hayes paused. She is he, murmured. The operations center was chaos. Linda Carson stood in the middle of the room, pointing at screens while engineers scrambled. We tried bypassing the diagnostic echo, Kyle said nervously, but it keeps rerouting. It's like the system wants us to see everything. Every weakness, every flaw. Linda pressed her fingers to her forehead. She knows exactly what she's doing. Marcus Lee spoke from a different workstation. Rayner is asking for a full incident report before sunrise. The board wants answers. Linda exhaled. Then pray Dr. Clarke is in a cooperative mood. Mark was still talking. Louder, angrier, more entitled with each passing second. And the tension was beginning to affect other passengers. A man in business class muttered, "Can someone shut him up?" Another huffed, "I've had a long day, I can't deal with this." Even Julia Monroe frowned deeply. Emily returned to the front galley, clearly shaken. Vanessa caught her arm gently. "Are you all right?" Emily swallowed hard. "He's just a lot." "His anger isn't yours to carry," Vanessa said quietly. "Remember that." Emily nodded, eyes glistening a bit. Kendra, however, stood frozen outside the first-class curtain, unsure what to do next. The authority she once believed in felt suddenly fragile. Vanessa watched her, not with judgment, but with recognition. Kendra was seeing something she had never bothered to see before. The room was not always hers to command. Sometimes the room had another center of gravity entirely. And tonight, that center wasn't in first class. Vanessa's laptop pinged. She opened it. A new notification appeared, Western Air, requesting immediate lockdown authorization, priority critical, recipient V. Clarke. Vanessa stared at the screen. This was the moment she had predicted. The moment the ripple became a wave. She didn't touch the keyboard. She didn't respond. She let the message sit there glowing softly. She felt Julia's eyes on her. "Is something happening, dear?" Julia whispered. "Yes," Vanessa replied softly. "Something is happening." Her voice carried no fear, only certainty. Not every battle was fought with shouting. Not every war needed fire. Sometimes power moves silently through a diagnostic echo, through a quiet refusal to answer a call, through a single woman deciding she would no longer move aside. Vanessa closed her laptop gently, her expression calm, her breathing slow. Tomorrow, she would walk into Western Air's headquarters not as a vendor, but as the woman who had shown them exactly where their cracks were, and exactly who they had underestimated. She rested her head back, letting the hum of the engines lull her back into a controlled stillness. For the first time that night, she allowed herself a small, private smile. Not of triumph, not of revenge, but of alignment. Her mother's voice echoed through her memory. One last time, baby, you don't have to shout to be strong. Just make sure they hear you when you whisper. Vanessa whispered back under her breath. They hear me now. The cabin felt different now, not chaotic, not loud, but charged, like the sky itself had paused to listen. Doctor. Vanessa Clarke kept her laptop closed on her lap, her fingers resting lightly on the cool surface. She could still feel the weight of that last notification lingering in her mind. Western Air requesting immediate lockdown authorization. It wasn't fear she felt, or triumph. It was clarity, quiet, steady, undeniable clarity. Across the aisle, Mrs. Julia Monroe sipped her tea with the slow elegance of someone who understood the world's shifting tides better than most. You handled that well, Julia said softly. Vanessa smiled faintly. I didn't do anything. Oh, sweetheart. Julia shook her head, eyes warm. Doing nothing is sometimes the loudest choice. Vanessa chuckled quietly because she knew the older woman was right. Before she could respond, a soft knock came from her left. Emily Reyes stood there hesitant but brave. Miss Clarke, she whispered, Captain Hayes asked if he could speak with you privately. He said, it's important. Vanessa nodded. Of course. She stood smoothing her blazer with quiet composure before following Emily to the small galley near the front. The curtain swayed behind them, sealing off the murmuring cabin. Captain Hayes was already there, posture straight, shoulders tight. He looked like a man balancing duty and uncertainty. Miss Clarke, he said respectfully, thank you for speaking with me. What's going on, Captain? He exhaled slowly. Headquarters is asking questions I don't have answers to. Vanessa waited, measured, silent, steady. Hayes continued, lowering his voice even more. They're confused. Your system is forcing them into full transparency. Every vulnerability, every hidden override, every inconsistency in their own protocols. He paused. They've never been exposed like this. Vanessa's gaze didn't waver. That's what diagnostics are for, Captain. To reveal things before they break. He nodded. I agree. But the timing, the escalation, it has people on edge. She studied him quietly. Are you on edge? Captain Hayes shook his head. No. Just aware. Very aware of what's happening around us. His eyes softened, and aware of what you're capable of. There was no accusation in his tone, only recognition. Vanessa considered him a moment. The man had shown her respect, restraint, and fairness since the beginning. She owed him honesty. Captain Hayes, she said gently. Western Air created this tension long before I touched a single line of code tonight. The captain's jaw tightened slightly, but again, not with anger, with understanding. Before either could speak again, Emily rushed in. Captain, sorry, there's something you need to hear. Hayes followed her into the cockpit. Vanessa didn't return to her seat. She stayed near the galley, leaning against the wall, listening to the faint hum of voices ahead. It wasn't long before Hayes returned. His face had changed, not alarmed, but serious. Miss Clarke, he said, we just received word that multiple media outlets are reporting delays across the Western Air network. They're calling it unusual. Highly unusual. Vanessa raised a brow. And they're connecting it back to this flight. She blinked once slowly. So, it had begun. Hayes continued, his voice calm but heavy. It seems an early version of the story is spreading online. Something about a first-class dispute, a black CEO being moved, and system delays happening moments after. Vanessa closed her eyes. Ryan, the young man, a few rows behind business class. She had seen his phone angled earlier. Of course. Hayes cleared his throat gently. I wanted you to hear it from me first. Thank you, she whispered. Because despite the storm brewing outside the cabin walls, the captain still treated her like a person, not a headline. Not a threat. Not a symbol. A person. Passengers were moving differently. Whispers brushed the air like shifting wind. Eyes lingered longer. Thoughts formed beneath breaths. Julia looked up when Vanessa sat down. Storm started, hasn't it? Vanessa smiled tiredly. Yes, it has. Well, Julia said, gently squeezing Vanessa's wrist, you brace differently when you've seen a storm coming. Vanessa let out a quiet, grateful breath. But not everyone was responding with quiet reflection. 2 rows back in business class, a man spoke loudly to his companion. I told you something big was happening. They say the delays are because of some CEO messing with the airline. Another voice added, is it even legal? She can't just freeze everything. Another softer tone, maybe ask why she had to. Vanessa heard all of it, but she didn't turn around. She didn't flinch. She just breathed deep and steady. Because storms didn't frighten her. They shaped her. Chaos had grown louder. Screens flickered with yellow alerts, red flags, warnings stacking on top of warnings. A technician shouted, systems aren't crashing, they're reporting. It's like a forced audit. Linda Carson rubbed her forehead, pacing. It's not sabotage, she muttered. It's a mirror. She's holding up a damn mirror. Marcus added, the board is awake. They're demanding immediate resolutions. Rayner wants answers by the time Clarke lands. No, Linda said quietly. Rayner wants salvation, and she's the only one who has it. Mark Ellison had quieted down, but only because several passengers had already confronted him. A woman in business class snapped, enough already. You're not the victim here. Another added, your tantrum is more annoying than any delay. Mark sat back, cheeks flushed. He was losing control of the room. He sensed it. He hated it. When Vanessa passed his seat on her way to stretch her legs, he glared at her. You started all of this, he hissed under his breath. She stopped, not confrontationally, not dramatically, just stopped, and looked at him with the saddest calm. No, she said softly. I didn't start any of this. For a second, Mark blinked in confusion. She continued, but you helped shine a light on it. Then she walked away, leaving him with the quiet truth he wasn't ready to face. Emily found Vanessa again. Miss Clarke, yes, Emily swallowed, nervous. The crew. We've been talking. We think what happened to you is wrong. Really wrong. Vanessa nodded gently. Thank you. Emily hesitated. Her voice trembled. I'm scared that being honest about it will get us in trouble. And there, it was the real wound. The deeper truth. The culture beneath the surface. Vanessa placed a hand on her shoulder. Emily, courage is never comfortable, but silence never saves you either. Emily's eyes glistened. Before she could speak again, Captain Hayes walked over. Miss Clarke, he said softly, we're about 90 minutes from landing, and headquarters has sent another update. Vanessa steadied herself. Tell me, he exhaled. The board has called an emergency session. Rayner wants you in that room the moment you touch down. Vanessa felt a slow, steady resolve settle in her bones. What did he say exactly? That you hold the key to the entire crisis. She nodded, calm, unshaken. Captain, the key was always transparency. He studied her. You know, I don't think they're ready for what you're about to show them. Vanessa looked out the window at the stars, steady, distant, quiet witnesses. No, she murmured. They're not. She turned back, her voice soft, but anchored with purpose. But they need it anyway. The plane continued westward, slicing through pockets of dark air. And in seat 2A, Dr. Vanessa Clarke sat upright, not anxious, not triumphant, but ready. Ready to walk into a room she had never been invited to and change everything inside it. Because tomorrow was not just a meeting, it was an awakening, and tonight was the silence before it. The cabin had settled into an uneasy, quiet, not peaceful, not tense, but suspended. Like a room after someone has spoken a truth no one can unhear. Dr. Vanessa Clarke sat with her hands gently folded, her breathing slow, her gaze fixed on the faint reflection in the window. The stars outside looked still, frozen against the endless dark. She couldn't tell whether she felt closer to them or further away from the world below. Her mother always told her, some moments, baby, their crossroads dressed like silence. This felt like one of them. Across the aisle, Julia Monroe adjusted her blanket and watched Vanessa with soft, perceptive eyes. You're thinking too much, Julia murmured. Vanessa smiled wearily. Is that possible on a night like this? Julia chuckled. For you, always. The older woman leaned in a little. You're not worried, she observed. You're preparing. Vanessa didn't deny it, because it was true. Tomorrow, she said quietly, is going to be big. Julia nodded. Big is an understatement, sweetheart. For a moment, they simply sat together in the soft hum of the cabin. And then ping, a message landed on Vanessa's phone. AeroShield Ops Rayner's legal team has requested full disclosure of your diagnostic logs. Advise. Vanessa exhaled slowly. Another message flashed. Aaron Brooks, don't send anything yet. We need to talk. Call me when you can. Aaron, her CTO, never used short messages unless something was very wrong. She would call him, but not yet. For now she needed quiet. She needed stillness to think. Trent Willis, the first officer, adjusted a dial on the console and glanced toward the captain. "You think she'll cooperate?" he asked. Captain Hayes kept his eyes on the dark horizon. "She's not being hostile," he said. "Everything she's done has been controlled, deliberate, intentional. So, we're basically flying the most powerful woman in tech across the country." After pushing her out of her seat, Hayes gave a tired smile. "When you put it that way," he murmured, "I feel like we're sitting in the wrong end of the food chain." Trent laughed nervously. "You think Rayner has any idea how bad this could get?" Hayes shook his head. "No, because he's still asking questions like a man who thinks he's steering the ship." He glanced back toward the cabin. "But Power's sitting in 2A tonight, and everyone knows it except him." The overnight team was drowning in alerts. Every screen displayed layers of warnings that no one could bypass. It wasn't chaos by accident, it was chaos by exposure. Linda Carson barked orders across the room. "Someone get me the timestamp on the first diagnostic trigger." "Already did," a technician shouted. "It matches the exact minute flight attendants logged the seat reassignment on 372. Linda froze. Her stomach dropped. "Say that again." The technician swallowed. "Nexus's system registered an irregular passenger displacement. The diagnostic looks like an automated integrity check." Linda covered her mouth. "My God, this wasn't revenge. This wasn't sabotage. It was a system doing what it was built to do when triggered by unethical behavior." Vanessa hadn't created the chaos. The system had, automatically. The realization shook Linda far deeper than she expected. Mark Ellison had quieted, not because he understood anything, but because the cabin no longer entertained his performance. People were tired. People wanted answers. People wanted accountability. And Mark felt the shift like a cold draft. When Vanessa passed him again on her way to stretch her legs, he straightened. "You really think you're the hero here?" he hissed. She stopped, gently turning her head just enough to face him. "I think," Vanessa said softly, "that tonight revealed more than you meant it to." Mark scoffed. "You're overreacting." "No," she answered, her voice calm. "Your reaction was the problem. Mine was the response." The man bristled, searching for a comeback he couldn't find. She waited, not impatiently, just present. When he could not speak, Vanessa gave him the smallest, saddest nod. Impact teaches faster than instruction. Then, she walked away, leaving Mark staring at a reflection of himself he didn't want to see. Emily Reyes sat hunched over a service cart, rubbing at her eyes. Vanessa approached her quietly. "Rough night?" Vanessa asked gently. Emily nodded, swallowing. "I thought I could handle anything," she whispered. "People yelling, flight delays, bad moods. But tonight," she shook her head, "I didn't realize how easily things could go wrong, just because someone thinks they're more important than someone else." Vanessa knelt beside her, not above her, not in front of her, beside. "That's how systems break," Vanessa said softly. "Not through explosions, through tolerated imbalance." Emily looked up at her, eyes wide. "Did you mean to cause all of this?" Vanessa inhaled deeply. "Emily, what happened tonight was bigger than me and bigger than you. The system responded to a breach in integrity." "You mean what they did to you?" "I mean the pattern," Vanessa corrected gently. "Every time a rule bends for the wrong person, someone else pays the price." Emily wiped her eyes. "It's not fair." "No," Vanessa said quietly. "But fairness isn't automatic, it's built." Emily breathed deeply, absorbing every word. Julia Monroe was listening more than she looked like she was sleeping. She heard Mark's hushed anger. She heard passengers whispering questions. She heard the nervous hope in Emily's voice. And she heard Vanessa's calm, unwavering, steadying. Julia knew the world was seeing something rare tonight. A woman who did not threaten, shout, or demand. A woman who simply stood still until the world saw its reflection in her silence. Julia smiled to herself. "Lord, help them tomorrow," she whispered. "They have no idea what kind of woman they're walking into that room with." She slipped into the tiny lavatory, locked the door, and dialed Aaron Brooks. He picked up instantly. "Vanessa, I'm here." He exhaled a breath she could hear through the phone. "Okay, you need to know something, and you're not going to like it." Vanessa leaned against the counter, ready. "Tell me." You remember the diagnostic trigger? The one they're freaking out about, yes. That protocol only activates when a certain threshold of ethical inconsistency is detected on the airline side. Vanessa stiffened. Aaron, are you telling me? Yes, he cut in. It wasn't your message that started it. It was theirs. She closed her eyes. Aaron continued. The moment they removed you from your seat using a fake policy, the system logged it as a violation of integrity metrics. That's what started the cascade. Her heartbeat slowed, not in fear and realization. So, this wasn't retaliation, she whispered. It was exposure, Aaron said. And it's not over. Vanessa opened her eyes. Aaron, what else is happening? You'll see when you land. But be ready. They're not just trying to cover the incident anymore. They're trying to contain the narrative. Vanessa felt the air shift around her. So tomorrow isn't about the contract. No, Aaron said softly. Tomorrow is about the culture behind the contract. Vanessa ended the call slowly, letting the truth settle. The system hadn't punished the airline. It had revealed it. Everything felt sharper, clearer. Passengers whispered. Attendants exchanged nervous glances. Mark sulked in frustrated silence. Julia raised an eyebrow as Vanessa approached. From that look on your face, the older woman said, I'd guess tomorrow just got bigger. Vanessa nodded once. It did. Good, Julia replied. Some truths deserve a bigger room. Vanessa sat back down in 2A, her spine straight but relaxed, her eyes steady. She no longer felt like she was on a plane. She felt like she was on the edge of a shift the entire airline industry wasn't ready for. And she would walk into that shift without anger, without drama, without noise, only with truth. The sky outside was still quiet, but inside the woman in seat 2A, a storm of purpose had already formed. And nothing on the ground waiting for her was prepared for the calm power she was about to bring. The cabin lights dimmed further as Flight 372 began its gentle descent toward Seattle. Normally, this part of the flight brought relief, people stretching, gathering belongings, mentally shifting back into their lives on the ground. Tonight, it felt different. It felt like the sky itself was holding its breath. Dr. Vanessa Clarke sat in 2A, her back straight, her hands folded loosely in her lap. On the surface, she looked serene, but inside her thoughts churned like slow, deliberate gears. Tomorrow would not simply be a meeting. It would be a reckoning. Across the aisle, Julia Monroe studied her with quiet admiration. You always get this look, Julia whispered. The way people look right before something big happens. Vanessa turned slightly. Is it that obvious? Julia smiled. Only to someone who's lived long enough to recognize it. Before Vanessa could respond, the cabin intercom chimed. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Hayes. We've begun our initial descent into Seattle-Tacoma. About 35 minutes until wheels down. A familiar murmur swept the cabin, people waking, stretching, whispering. But the tension remained. The passengers sensed something unresolved floating in the air around them. Something unfinished. Something waiting. A sharp ping from a phone. Then another. Then dozens. Passengers frowned at their screens. A man muttered what the... A woman whispered, is this real? Julia adjusted her glasses, reading a headline aloud under her breath. Western Air delays nationwide raise questions after in-flight incident involving black CEO. Vanessa inhaled slowly. It had begun spilling beyond the walls of the aircraft. Another voice in business class spoke up loudly. It says the delays started minutes after a first-class passenger was moved. Someone else added, and that the passenger is. Her heads turned slowly, hesitantly towards seat 2A. Not accusingly, not angrily, but with dawning understanding, and something else, respect. Vanessa didn't shrink from their stares. She simply breathed steady and unshaken. This is outrageous, he hissed, gripping his armrest. My name is in one of these posts. This is defamation. Kendra approached him carefully. Sir, please keep your voice down. We're landing soon. Mark jabbed a finger into the air. This is her fault, he said loudly enough for half the cabin to hear. She started all this. She froze the airline. Passengers shifted uncomfortably. Emily stepped forward. Sir, that's not accurate. Mark cut her off sharply. Oh, please. You're going to defend her now. She caused a national delay over a seat. Vanessa finally turned her head, not urgently, not dramatically, just enough to meet his eyes. Mr. Ellison, she said quietly. The system revealed the truth. It wasn't my anger that caused it. It was your entitlement. He scoffed, ready to fire back, but before he could, someone in business class snapped. For once in your life, stop talking. Mark blinked. A middle-aged man stood up just enough to lean into the aisle. You're the reason this flight has been miserable. Not her. Another passenger chimed in. She didn't yell at anyone. You did, a woman added. She didn't demand special treatment. You did. One by one voices rose, not shouting, not chaotic, but firm, holding him accountable. Mark's mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time all night, he was speechless. And Vanessa didn't say another word to him. Sometimes silence delivers the sharpest consequence. Captain Hayes sat with his headset angled slightly off one ear. The radio buzzed with updates. Media outside corporate HQ board, demanding immediate briefing. Rayner wants Clarke escorted straight inside. Do we have cooperation? Hayes rubbed his jaw. We're descending into a storm we can't see, Trent murmured. No, Hayes replied. We can see it. We just can't avoid it. Linda Carson watched the news on the big screen, frozen in place. A headline scrolled across. Leaked internal logs suggest integrity failure in Western Air procedures. Linda's stomach dropped. Another report flashed. Independent analysts confirmed diagnostic triggers tied to policy inconsistencies. Then, expert, this isn't hacking. This is accountability. She sank into her chair. This is going to take the whole company apart, she whispered. Marcus Lee responded quietly. Maybe it needed to. Linda looked up at him, startled. Marcus continued. Sometimes systems only change when someone forces them to look at themselves. Not much, just enough to make passengers grip their seats. Emily steadied the cart. Kendra held onto the bulkhead. And Vanessa, she barely moved. But inside something tightened, a familiar ache she rarely allowed herself to feel. A memory flickered. Uninvited, her first job interview out of grad school. The hiring manager, glancing at her resume, then at her skin, then offering her the IT assistant role instead of the director-level position she was qualified for. You're ambitious, he had said, as long as you keep your expectations realistic. That day she walked out with a polite smile and built a company that would one day eclipse his. But tonight's turbulence stirred that old ache again. That old pattern, that old truth. People saw what they wanted to see, until they couldn't ignore what was real. Vanessa blinked the memory away and steadied herself, not her body, her heart. Julia sensed it. She leaned in gently, her voice warm. Whatever you're remembering, let it go. Tomorrow you walk in with everything you've become. Vanessa swallowed. I'm ready, she whispered. And she meant it. Fully, deeply, without hesitation. A new message on her screen. Aaron Brooks, Vanessa. The board just issued an internal alert. They're preparing to suspend Rayner until this is resolved. Vanessa exhaled. That was faster than she expected. Followed by a second message. Aaron, they want you to brief them personally. First thing after landing. No delays. Vanessa closed her eyes. The weight was immense. Not heavy, just enormous. Julia whispered, You okay? Yes, Vanessa answered softly. I just didn't expect the consequences to spread this fast. Julia smiled sadly. Truth rarely waits. The cabin lights brightened. People straightened in their seats. Seat belts clicked. Vanessa felt the slight drop in her stomach as the plane descended through low clouds. Seattle city lights flickered beneath them, shimmering like scattered embers. But this landing wasn't an arrival. It was an entrance. Captain Hayes made one last announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be on the ground shortly. Welcome to Seattle. For those connecting, please check with gate agents due to system-wide adjustments tonight. He paused barely. And thank you for your patience. Vanessa heard the deeper meaning woven into those words. Patience for what happens next. Phones switched from airplane mode. Notifications poured in. Headlines refreshed in real time. A woman gasped. It's trending everywhere. A man added, her name's all over the news. Another whispered, she's the CEO, in 2A. And then, a new headline flashed on multiple screens. Western Air Board calls emergency meeting after discrimination allegation involving high-level tech partner. Emily looked at Vanessa with wide eyes. Ms. Clarke, this is huge. Vanessa gave her a gentle nod. I know. Kendra approached, her posture different, now less rigid, more humbled. Miss Clarke, I'm sorry for how I handled things earlier. Vanessa met her eyes. Thank you for saying that. I truly didn't understand the impact, Kendra whispered. You do now, Vanessa said softly. That's what matters. Kendra nodded and stepped away, shaken but sincere. Mark muttered to himself, they're going to ruin me. My name is everywhere. Julia leaned across the aisle, her tone gentle but piercing. Maybe now you'll understand what it feels like to be held accountable. Mark flinched, because it wasn't cruel. It was true. The seatbelt sign went off. Captain Hayes stepped into first class. Miss Clarke, he said quietly, the airline has sent representatives to escort you straight to the boardroom. Vanessa stood, calm, grounded, prepared. Julia squeezed her hand. Go. Show them the woman they underestimated. Vanessa smiled. I will. She stepped into the aisle, into the quiet stares of passengers who had watched everything unfold, not just the injustice, but the response. Not loud, not vengeful, but powerful in a way that reshaped the room. As Vanessa walked toward the exit, the hum of whispers followed her, not fearful, not doubtful, but awed. Something had shifted tonight, not just for her, not just for Western Air, but for everyone who watched a black woman in seat 2A rise without raising her voice. The storm had landed. Now came the impact. The jet bridge connected to Flight 372 with a soft mechanical thud, a sound that usually signaled the end of a journey. Tonight it sounded more like the beginning of a confrontation. Dr. Vanessa Clarke stood in the narrow aisle, letting the passengers ahead of her file out first. Not because she hesitated, she didn't, but because she knew the moment she stepped off this plane she would no longer be in the shadows of the situation. She would be walking straight into its center. Julia Monroe touched her arm gently. You ready, sweetheart? Vanessa gave her a calm, steady nod. More than ready. Julia smiled proudly. Go on then. Time for the truth to have a voice. Vanessa squeezed her hand in thanks before making her way out of the cabin. As she stepped onto the jet bridge, the cool, recycled airport air swept around her, sterile, humming, and oddly expectant. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered like nervous breaths. Two Western Air representatives stood waiting. Black suits, tight smiles, eyes filled with forced composure. One stepped forward. Dr. Clarke, I'm Daniel Harris, corporate liaison. This is Michelle Rowan, legal counsel. We've been instructed to escort you directly to the boardroom. Of course, Vanessa replied. She didn't apologize, didn't explain, didn't soften her tone. She simply walked. Everything felt sharper. The terminal buzzed with late-night travelers, anxious families, sleepy children, exhausted business workers. People dragging luggage. People scrolling phones. People moving without thought. But here and there, eyes lifted, recognizing her. Whispers trailing behind her like soft ripples in a deep lake. That's her. The CEO from the flight, I heard. She froze the whole network. No, she triggered an internal investigation. Whatever she did, they messed with the wrong woman. Vanessa didn't react. She didn't need to. Every whisper carried its own truth. Beside her, the legal counsel Michelle stole subtle glances, curiosity mixed with anxiety. Finally, Michelle spoke, her voice barely above a breath. Dr. Clarke, if you don't mind me asking, are the stories online true? Vanessa's gaze remained forward. Which stories? Michelle hesitated. The ones saying Western Air violated its own policies. That you were reassigned to accommodate an employee. Vanessa remained calm. I believe your internal logs can answer that better than I can. Michelle's footsteps faltered slightly. Daniel, the corporate liaison, cut in quickly. We just want to make sure tonight doesn't escalate further. Vanessa slowed, turning her head slightly toward him. Tonight didn't escalate, Mr. Harris, she said quietly. It revealed. He swallowed hard. Then, none of them spoke again. Executives filled the hallway outside the boardroom. Some pacing, some whispering. Most trying desperately to appear composed. The emergency meeting had begun as soon as Flight 372 touched down. Screens around the room displayed network logs, timestamped alerts, system-wide delays. Every piece of evidence pointed to one truth: Western Air's internal integrity threshold had been breached from within. The system that triggered the freeze wasn't external. It was theirs. A senior VP rubbed his eyes. What do we even say to her? Someone else whispered, we can't spin this. Not to her. Another added quietly, if the board finds out this whole thing began with a discriminatory seat reassignment, we're done. The glass doors swung open, and Thomas Rayner, still CEO for the moment, stepped out. His face was pale, drawn, but determined. She's almost here, he said. Everyone inside. Now. Executives filed into the room. Rayner remained at the entrance, smoothing down his tie with shaking hands. He knew this wasn't going to be a meeting. It was going to be a reckoning. As they approached the escalator to the secure corporate floor, Vanessa took a slow breath. Something in her chest tightened, not with fear, but with memory. She remembered being 28, standing in another corporate lobby waiting to present a groundbreaking algorithm to a panel of executives. A receptionist approached her back then. Delivery trucks unload in the basement, the woman had said, eyes sliding over Vanessa's skin, her hair, her presence. Vanessa had smiled politely and replied, I'm the one presenting. I built the system you're adopting. The receptionist's face had flushed with embarrassment. But Vanessa never forgot the sting, or the truth beneath it. Today felt like the inverse of that moment, yet born from the same root. This time, there would be no basement. No assumption about her role. She would walk straight into the top floor because she had earned every step of it. Daniel glanced at her as they rode the escalator upward. You seem calm. Vanessa's voice was soft but precise. I don't need to raise my voice to be heard. Michelle inhaled sharply because she understood exactly what that meant. The atmosphere shifted. The carpets were thicker, the lighting warmer, the silence heavier. Vanessa's heels clicked softly against polished floors. At the end of the hallway loomed two tall glass doors, frosted, elegant, intimidating. The boardroom. Daniel paused in front of them. Dr. Clarke, before we go in, I want to say, but he didn't finish. Because the doors opened from the inside, and there stood Thomas Rayner. His smile was tight, strained. His eyes carried the exhaustion of a man who had run out of excuses and options. Dr. Clarke, he said, attempting warmth. Thank you for coming. Vanessa stepped forward, posture composed. Mr. Rayner. His gaze flickered over her, calculating, anxious, hopeful, fearful, all at once. Before we begin, he said cautiously, I want you to know that the board is fully committed to resolving this night's unfortunate circumstances. Vanessa held his gaze. Unfortunate circumstances, she repeated quietly. Rayner swallowed. We simply want to correct the misunderstanding. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, not angrily, but knowingly. Is that what you believe this is? She asked. A misunderstanding, he hesitated. And in his silence the truth spoke for him. Vanessa stepped past him, walking into the boardroom. Rayner followed, shoulders tense. 12 board members sat around a long mahogany table. Screens behind them displayed real-time system logs, media coverage, legal liabilities, passenger testimonies. The moment Vanessa entered, the room shifted. Some stood immediately. Others remained frozen. Every gaze locked onto her, some with guilt, others with fear, and a few with relief. As if they had been waiting for someone to say what they could not. The chairwoman, Evelyn Graves, rose from her seat. Dr. Clarke, she said, with genuine respect, thank you for meeting with us on such short notice. Vanessa inclined her head. I assume you've reviewed the logs. We have, Evelyn replied, and we're deeply concerned. Vanessa folded her hands lightly. You should be. A murmur rippled around the table. Evelyn gestured for her to sit. Please. You have the floor. Vanessa did not sit. Not yet. Instead, she stood at the head of the table where authority naturally belonged and met each pair of eyes in turn. When integrity fails in one corner of a system, she said, her voice calm but resonant, it doesn't stay in that corner. The room went utterly still. Vanessa continued, it spreads. Quietly, consistently, predictably, until the system has no choice but to expose the truth. She took one step forward. What happened tonight was not an accident. It was not a glitch. It was not an emotional overreaction. Rayner shifted uncomfortably. It was a threshold cross, Vanessa said. And the system did exactly what it was designed to do. The board members exchanged looks, some fearful, some thoughtful. Vanessa finished. Tonight Western Air didn't break. It revealed. The words landed heavier than any allegation could. Evelyn Graves exhaled. Dr. Clarke, we would like to hear your full analysis. Vanessa nodded once. Then finally, deliberately, she took her seat. The room braced itself, because everyone understood the woman from seat 2A was not here for revenge. She was here for truth, and truth was about to have a voice. The boardroom was silent not because people lacked words, but because they feared the weight of the ones waiting inside them. Doctor. Vanessa Clarke sat at the head of the long mahogany table, body upright, hands gently folded, her expression calm but unwavering. All eyes were on her, and she carried that attention with grace, not ego. Chairwoman Evelyn Graves broke the silence. Dr. Clarke, we'd like you to begin whenever you're ready. Vanessa nodded once. Very well. She tapped her tablet. The screens behind her illuminated with a clean, structured timeline of system logs, every alert, every trigger, every escalation. This is the sequence of events from tonight, she began. Unfiltered, untampered, just the truth in your own data. A ripple of discomfort moved around the table. Vanessa continued. At 7:14 p.m., a seat reassignment was entered manually into the first-class ledger. That entry violated internal passenger priority protocols. Rayner stiffened beside her. Vanessa tapped again. At 7:15 p.m., your integrity threshold was breached. Nexus flagged the inconsistency as an ethical deviation, not a technical one. The system recognized behavior outside policy. One board member leaned forward. It recognized discrimination. Vanessa didn't respond directly. She simply continued. By 7:16 p.m., Nexus activated an automated transparency cascade, an internal audit that escalates when it detects unresolved bias-related anomalies. Another board member whispered. So the freeze was an automated response. Yes, Vanessa said. Nexus was designed to expose patterns, not people. It doesn't shame, it reveals. She turned a page on her tablet. What happened afterward? The delays, the internal scrambling were consequences of the system doing what Western Air paid it to do. Evelyn Graves exhaled slowly. Tonight showed us more than a single mistake. Vanessa nodded. Yes, tonight showed you a pattern, a culture with fractures you've ignored until it broke in public. The words were soft, but they landed like heavy stones. Dr. Clarke, are you suggesting this entire incident is our fault? Vanessa turned her face toward him slowly. I'm saying the system doesn't trigger without cause. Rayner's jaw tightened. But surely you understand this is incredibly damaging. Truth often is, Vanessa replied quietly. A few board members suppressed reactions. Rayner pressed on. Then tell us plainly, what do you want from us? The question hung in the room like an accusation. Vanessa didn't flinch. I don't want anything from you, Mr. Rayner. He blinked, confused. I want something for your employees, and for your passengers, and for everyone who has ever been treated as an inconvenience instead of a human being. A slow quiet filled the room. Not defensive, reflective. Vanessa continued. What happened to me tonight was not unique. It was familiar, tired, predictable, and preventable. An older board member, Mr. Callahan, cleared his throat. How many incidents like this has Nexus flagged in the last year? Vanessa didn't hesitate. 461. The room froze. 400. Someone whispered. Evelyn looked stricken. Why didn't we know? Vanessa answered simply. Because the logs were reviewed, dismissed, or quietly archived. A woman near the center of the table closed her eyes as shame washed over her face. This is bigger than a seat, Vanessa said softly. This is about a system that chose silence over accountability. She tapped again. A new chart appeared, beautifully structured, devastatingly clear. Here, she said, is the breakdown of who was affected. Race, gender, travel class, income level. Each bar was a mirror, and every mirror reflected the same truth. The majority of those harmed looked like her. Rayner swallowed hard. One board member whispered, "Oh my God." Another muttered, "This has been happening under our watch." Vanessa looked at them, not with anger, not with pity, but with calm clarity. Accountability isn't blame, she said. It's recognition. Evelyn leaned forward, voice shaking. Dr. Clarke, what would you recommend? Vanessa stood. Slowly, deliberately. And the room listened with the silence of people who finally understood the cost of not listening sooner. I recommend you do 3 things, Vanessa said. One, acknowledge the truth, publicly, without spin. Two, board members exchanged nervous looks. Two, implement a full cultural audit, independent, transparent, with real consequences. Evelyn nodded slowly. And three, she asked. Vanessa's eyes softened. Three, rewrite the policies, not to prevent bad behavior, but to protect dignity. The room absorbed every word. This industry needs better, Vanessa continued. And so does your company. Someone finally asked the question, hanging in the air. Why help us? After what happened to you tonight, why help us at all? Vanessa paused. Her voice, when it came, carried both softness and steel. Because what happened to me tonight will happen to someone else tomorrow if nothing changes. She let the truth settle. And I don't believe in walking away when I have the ability to make things better. The room went silent again. But this silence was different. Not fearful, not defensive. Ready. Dr. Clarke, would you consider serving as an external ethics architect for our cultural overhaul? Rayner jerked his head toward her, stunned. You're offering her a structural role, he blurted. Evelyn didn't look at him. Western Air needs change. She is uniquely capable of guiding it. Rayner looked shaken, sweating. Vanessa answered softly. I'm not here to take positions. I'm here for integrity. Evelyn nodded. And integrity is what we need. Rayner's voice cracked. Evelyn, this is— She cut him off sharply. No, Thomas. Tonight happened because we allowed patterns like this to continue. And it ends now. The room went cold. And Rayner understood what he hadn't wanted to see. His power was slipping. Vanessa lifted her tablet again. There is something else you all need to know. The board members leaned in. Tonight's cascade was not triggered by me, Vanessa said quietly. The room stilled. It was triggered by your own behavior. Gasps, whispers, hands covering mouths. Vanessa continued calmly. Nexus is built to detect policy breaches, especially those tied to bias. When your staff removed me without cause, the system responded automatically. Rayner looked as if someone had pulled the floor out from under him. So, you didn't do this? Evelyn asked, astonished. No, Vanessa said simply. Your airline did. Several board members turned to Rayner. Evelyn's expression hardened. This was not sabotage. This was exposure. Rayner collapsed into his chair, overwhelmed. Softly, steadily, decisively. And she said the words that shifted the room entirely. I didn't come here to break Western Air. I came here to give it a chance to rebuild. No one spoke. No one breathed loudly. No one deflected. Because everyone in the room finally saw the truth. They weren't listening to a victim, or a threat, or a problem. They were listening to the woman their company needed most. And they had seen her last until tonight. For a long moment after Vanessa finished speaking, the boardroom remained still, not frozen, not shocked, but reflective, like a room finally seeing itself clearly for the first time. Chairwoman Evelyn Graves leaned back in her seat, hands clasped together, her expression thoughtful. Dr. Clarke, she said softly, I hope you understand. What you've given us tonight is more than a presentation. Vanessa tilted her head gently. I understand. It's a mirror, Evelyn whispered. Vanessa nodded. And mirrors, she said, are only painful when you're seeing a truth you've avoided. Murmurs rippled around the table. Not defensive, not evasive. Understanding. Acceptance. Even gratitude. His voice, for the first time all evening, held something unfamiliar, not authority, not fear, but honesty. I failed tonight, he said, his eyes fixed somewhere on the table. I failed to step in. I failed to recognize the implications of my own leadership. And I failed to protect a partner who deserved better. Vanessa didn't respond. She didn't need to. Rayner's voice faltered. I thought I was maintaining order, but I was maintaining comfort. He swallowed hard. And comfort isn't integrity. The room stayed quiet, letting him sit with the truth he had finally spoken. Evelyn's voice returned, steady but firm. Thomas, the board will meet privately after this. You may not remain CEO after tonight. Rayner nodded slowly, accepting resigned. I understand. For a fleeting moment, Vanessa saw the man he might have been if he had listened sooner or cared sooner. But tonight wasn't about punishment. It was about clarity, and he had finally reached it. We would like to form an independent reform committee, she said, and we want you on it. Vanessa exhaled quietly. Ms. Graves, I will help, but only under one condition. Name it. That the people most affected by these policies have a seat at the table. Evelyn's eyes softened. Done. And not as tokens, Vanessa added. As contributors. With decision-making power. Evelyn straightened. Agreed. Vanessa nodded once. Then finally she sat back fully in her chair. Not in relief. In alignment. The kind of alignment that comes only after a long, painful truth finally finds air. It was nearly sunrise. The sky outside the tall windows had softened to a pale blue streaked with the early pink of morning. Executives left quietly, each carrying their own thoughts, some heavy, some hopeful. Rayner lingered a moment, nodded once to Vanessa, then slipped out the door without another word. When the room emptied, Vanessa remained seated a while longer. Just breathing. Just letting the weight of the night settle through her, not as a burden, but as understanding. The door opened gently. Julia Monroe stepped inside, leaning on her cane, offering the same warm-smiled wisdom she'd given her hours earlier on the plane. "Thought I'd find you here," she said. Vanessa smiled softly. "You didn't have to come all the way up." "Oh, please," Julia replied. "You think I'd miss the finale of a night like this?" She eased herself into the seat beside Vanessa. "Well," Julia asked. "How do you feel?" Vanessa thought for a long moment. "Tired," she admitted. "But also steady." Julia nodded. "That's the feeling you get when you tell the truth and survive it." Vanessa breathed slowly, letting the words sink in. "I didn't want revenge," she whispered. "I just wanted clarity." "And you got it," Julia said. "Now, what will you do with it?" Vanessa turned her gaze toward the window where the sky brightened by the minute. "I'll help them," she said softly, "but I'll also hold them accountable." Julia's eyes glimmered. "That's what leadership is, sweetheart. Balance without bending. Compassion without compromise." Vanessa smiled, not broadly, but deeply. Then the two women sat quietly as morning arrived. Passengers who had been on Flight 372 were gathered at various coffee stands scrolling through updates on their phones. Some nodded. Some frowned thoughtfully. A few said nothing, but their eyes held new understanding. Emily and Kendra, waiting for their next assignment, watched the news play on a muted screen overhead. Emily whispered, "I didn't realize how much one decision could hurt someone." Kendra exhaled. "Tonight taught me more about dignity than 30 years on this job." Emily reached over and squeezed her arm. "We get to do better now." Kendra nodded. "Yes, we do." Aaron Brooks waited against a railing, hands in his pockets, watching the sunrise reflect off the glass building. He looked up as Vanessa stepped out. "You okay?" he asked. Vanessa nodded slowly. "I think so." Aaron studied her the way only someone who understood her work and her soul could. "You didn't just fix their system tonight," he said. "No," she replied, "I didn't." "You fixed the room." Vanessa paused. "I didn't fix anything, Aaron." She looked toward the horizon. "I just told the truth long enough for people to hear it." He smiled, a warm, proud, quiet smile. "That's what strength looks like." Vanessa returned a soft smile of her own. "I'm heading home," she said. "Get some rest, please." "Only if you do," Aaron replied. She laughed lightly. "I'll try." The morning air wrapped around her like a new beginning. Cool, honest, alive. And for the first time all night, she felt the weight in her chest lift. Not because the problem was gone, but because she had faced it. Fully. Without raising her voice. Without shrinking. Without choosing the easy road. Her mother's voice drifted back to her in a soft echo. "Baby, you don't have to fight to prove yourself. Just stand where you belong." And tonight, Vanessa had stood exactly where she belonged. Not in seat 1A. Not in seat 2A. Not even in the boardroom. But in the truth. And she knew as she reached her car and opened the door that the story didn't end here. Someone else, somewhere on another flight, another office, another day, would face the same familiar weight she had carried. But because of tonight, the system would see them, the policies would protect them, and the room would be different. Just enough. A little more fair, a little more human. She wondered if they would ever know why. Maybe they wouldn't know her name. Maybe they wouldn't know her story. But they would feel the change. And that was enough. Vanessa watched the sun rise over Seattle for a long, quiet moment. Then she whispered to herself, not for the board, not for the airline, not for the headlines, but for the woman she had fought so hard to become. "I'm still here. And I'm still enough." Then she drove into the morning. A new day. a better day. One she had helped shape not with fire, but with truth. And truth she knew now was the strongest kind of dawn. There are moments in life when the world tests not our strength, but our sense of worth. Moments when someone looks at us, and without saying it directly suggests we don't belong. Most of us have lived through something like that, even if the setting was different. A workplace, a hospital, a family gathering, a simple line at the grocery store. Doctor. Vanessa Clarke's story is not extraordinary because it happened on an airplane. It is extraordinary because of how she responded with clarity, with dignity, and without losing herself in anger. Her experience teaches us something timeless. Power isn't always loud. Courage isn't always visible. And dignity is never negotiable. Many of us, especially as we grow older, carry memories of being overlooked or dismissed. Often, we stayed silent not out of weakness, but out of survival. Vanessa reminds us that choosing calm doesn't mean choosing to be small. Sometimes the quietest choices create the biggest change. And perhaps the most comforting truth is this: when we stand in our worth, even softly, the world eventually adjusts around us. Maybe slowly, maybe painfully, but it adjusts. So, take this story with you. Let it remind you that your value is not up for debate, not by strangers, not by systems, not by circumstance. You belong exactly where you stand. Thank you for spending your time with this story.